No, watch
this
this then
is my
read it.
presentation on sugar, and my name is Tyler, and you're in for a sweet surprise.
Make sure you speak up.
Alright, so too much sugar. So the American Heart Association recommends that we have 36 grams of sugar daily. But the average teenager who is considered healthy, make sure you take in that part, because normal teenager is a lot higher. But with a teenager who considers themselves healthy, they consume 144 grams of sugar, while an adult who thinks they're healthy consumes 100 grams of sugar. Alright, so let's say for breakfast, it's just a meal. You have some yogurt with berries and granola. For snack, you have coffee, cake with black coffee and almond milk, but the coffee has no sugar in it. And for lunch, you have a turkey wrap. Snack, you have trail mix. And for dinner, you have pineapple sweet and sour chicken. I mean, that sounds pretty healthy, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Here, as I... Oh, crap. Well, actually, the whole day, you would have had 141.5 grams of sugar. And so, I'm going to pass this out. And this basically goes down deeper into how much sugar is actually in what parts of the meals.
What was the total on that?
141.
141.
And what is the recommendation daily?
36.
Oh, isn't that
That's
20
the
or
American
something?
Heart Association.
Yeah, there's a few different reports. The China study's 20 and the American Heart Association is 30.
That's what I was gonna ask.
Alright, so here I have a graph showing basically sugar versus in different countries around the world and how much sugar they consume. So the U.S., as you can see, we're the highest, and we consume about
Number one.
consume about 122 grams of sugar. And then if you go lower, places like India, they consume only 5.1 grams of sugar a day. And so that's just crazy. I think that's why they add so much spice to their food, because they want to kill their taste buds, so they don't care about the sugar.
Back on that.
Go
Oh,
ahead.
yeah, you can.
Is that, based on starvation and stuff too, or for like China and India, I don't know.
No, I don't know. I think it's just a general.
Or just the way they eat?
When the documentaries that I've watched on this one, and we'll see a little bit about it, is that they don't have as much processed foods as the Westerns, as the United States does. And we do a lot of fast food, and we do a lot of processed meals instead of cooking our own meals. And you don't see that in India, Indonesia, China, Israel. They do a lot of home cooked meals, and a lot of it's whole foods.
Thank you, sorry.
Seems like a lot of more of the first world countries, if you look on there, are the more higher grams of sugar.
Mhm.
All the Western
Right.
countries are just
They're up there.
really up there, huh?
Yeah.
So it's better to cook your
I'm
own.
surprised Russia is so low. Russia.
Russia.
And me too.
Yeah.
I was shocked when I saw that.
No, I imagine they're pretty
But they also have
cooking a lot of their own stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, well, explain to them. Well, no, we're not going about fat. Go ahead. Keep going. Sorry.
Alright, so on this page I have a few pictures of some graphs that I found on the internet. And so the one on the left, it shows deaths from diseases like heart disease. And then on the right I have the amount of sugar in consumption over the years. And as you can see, both graphs show a curve that goes from the bottom up. And if you put them together, they almost look the same. You straighten them out. And then, so I think it shows that there's a correlation between the sugar and deaths from diseases and just getting the diseases in general. And then I found this graph on the bottom. I found this on one of the websites. And this is an example of a graph that the sugar company tries to give to us, because I went deeper into the website, and it was telling me how sugar's not the problem. It's carbohydrates and it's fat. And while it's all part of the problem, sugar is the main problem. But they're trying to stray away from that, saying that even though sugar's going down, obesity is still going up. Alright, so I picked 3 diseases. I picked, although there's many I could choose from, I picked Alzheimer's, diabetes, and ADD. Also ADHD. Alright, so Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is a disorder of the brain. And as you can see here, people without Alzheimer's and all their activity, the light basically shows the activity, and it's a bunch of activity. In the brain with Alzheimer's, the back of the brain, the activity seems to have decreased, and this is because when you have Alzheimer's, a piece in the back of the brain called the hippocampus starts shrinking, and when the hippocampus it goes in part with your memory, basically. And so when that starts shrinking, neurons start disconnecting and dying. And so this is what causes a decrease in activity. And also when you get older, your brain starts to shrink generally. So basically what Alzheimer's does is it basically shrinks it basically speeds up the aging of your brain. And so once your brain starts shrinking, dementia sets in. So this is basically when you can't remember anything, and you have no common sense, basically. And when this happens, it is fatal. And so basically, if you are 80 and older and you are diagnosed with dementia, then you have about 3 to 4 more years to live. And if you are younger, you have about 10. And so I found this study at Brown's University that's pretty interesting. They had 2 groups of rats. One group they gave a healthy diet. They gave lettuce, all those other foods. And then another group of rats, they gave a meal with the sugar equivalent to our diets. And so that's about 122 grams. And even though it's going to affect the rat more, it's basically going to show in a larger scale. And so that didn't make sense. But so basically, the first group of rats, they put in this big tub that was filled with water, and it had a small island in it. And they showed the rats before how to get to the island. And so they put the first rat in the water that had the healthy diet. It got to the island very quickly. They got the second one. They put the second one in, and it had a hard time swimming. And so it started circling the island. And it took the rat from the second group about 4 times as long just to get to the island, because it had problems remembering how to get there. Alright, so diabetes. Diabetes is when your pancreas has been overworked and it produces no to little insulin. And crap, I just froze. But it produces no to little insulin. And so when this happens, you have to either give yourself insulin shots, or you have to, or you just have to watch your diet. And so diabetes and Alzheimer's are actually connected, because when your blood pressure is high, it causes inflammation in the brain. And when your brain is inflamed, it starts aging faster. And so this is when dementia can set in. Alright, so ADD. ADD is a genetic order. It basically makes people fidget a lot and can make them act inappropriately in certain situations. And so sugar does not cause this disease. It doesn't give people this disease, but it does affect it. And so doctors have came up with medications for this disease, but they're not very good for you, but they're very helpful in certain situations. And so, but what sugar does when a kid is not on their medicine and they have this disease, it's basically like adding alcohol to a fire. It just makes all your symptoms worse. Alright, so the brain. There's many systems in the brain, but the one I'm going to focus on is the iambic system. So this is in control of your reward system and your emotional state. And so basically in this iambic system, there are neurons and receptors. So if a neuron is a teacher that's commanding a student who is a receptor, a neurotransmitter is basically a message. All right, and so it acts as a lock and key system. So this neuron can only connect with this receptor. So the neurotransmitter can only go to this receptor, just to make sure that the right one goes to the right one. And this system plays a key role in addiction. All right, so sugar. We do need sugar because what it does is when it gets into our body, it turns into glucose, and then glucose can then be turned into ATP. And what ATP is, it's basically energy that our cells can use. And so, but when there's too much sugar, that glucose will be turned into fat. And so when people keep eating more and more sugar and consuming it, they're just more fat keeps building up. And so when you eat sugar, your taste buds feel that sweet taste, and so that they send it up to your iambic system. And what it does, your iambic system does, is it releases tons of dopamine. And what dopamine is a pleasure chemical. So it basically makes you feel good. Like when you're hanging out with friends, a little bit is produced. It makes everything enjoyable. And so the reason healthy food isn't as addicting is because when you consume healthy food, not as much dopamine is released. And so if you keep eating that same healthy food, the dopamine level keeps on going down. Alright, so drugs and sugar. So cocaine and amphetamines. These are both drugs that are commonly used, and people usually administer it through their nose because that's the fastest way to get to the brain. And basically, when it gets to the brain, it makes it so neurons start I don't know the word for it, but producing multiple neurotransmitters randomly, and sometimes prevent the recycling of neurotransmitters. And so this makes you get those weird feelings. And also dopamine is released a ton. And so this is what makes the pleasure of the drugs. And so it makes you get this high feeling, which is just like sugar. And so the comparison between our sugar and cocaine in those both, the thing is when you have both, you constantly need to have more and more because the dopamine levels keep going down and down because you've had that same feeling over and over. So if you want that same feeling that you've had, then you have to have more the next time. And so as you can see here, these are this is both the brain, and this right here is a pleasure center. And as you can see, both are actually lighting up. But as you can see in the sugar is actually lighting up more than the drugs are. So it can show that sugar can be actually more addicting than the drugs can be. Alright, and so in conclusion, we shouldn't eat as much sugar. We should start exercising more, having a more healthy diet, and yeah. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah.
So when the dopamine is released, why does if it's just do other things cause it? What was it?
Think about what you're going to ask and then come back later.
Mr. Roger, go first.
Oh, no, that's all right. You know, I don't know. I'm just gonna ask this question. Dopamine, does that come when you exercise also?
I
From
think so,
the
yeah.
endorphins?
Yes.
I think
With
so.
dripping of the brain? Is that what
I
that
think-
is? The dripping of the brain? Is-
Yeah. Well, if I give him a hug
Yeah,
right now,
right.
dopamine
job.
just got released.
Yeah. Because okay.
Yeah.
I think it's anytime you feel good, right?
Yeah.
It gives you that, like if someone makes you laugh, you're having the dopamine release. Well,
Well,
talk about how the reason, explain to Roger why eating the sugar and having a hug, getting the dopamine from a hug, and then getting the dopamine from sugar, what's the
Well,
difference?
The difference is how much dopamine is produced. With sugar, are with sugar. Well, your brain is totally overloaded with dopamine.
Steroids.
And
Okay.
but the thing is, though, when you keep on consuming the sugar or you have these drugs, and you keep on going higher and higher, the normal pleasures like having a hug or something like that don't become enjoyable anymore.
So you need more
You need more.
to get the
Okay.
same.
So you had a meal, like a whole day
Yeah.
plan of like the whole all the meals, and that was supposed to be a healthy one.
Yeah.
Do you have one of like, say, a unhealthy or a normal one? Someone who eats like McDonald's every day, or
No, I don't. But that would be
Way off the chart.
that'd be a good idea.
So you're saying that people who think they're healthy are really, from what you're saying, this has 141 grams of sugar, and if the National Heart,
Yeah.
they recommend 36, so this person has, quadrupled their sugar intake, and they think they're healthy. So you're saying that most Americans, we're eating way too much sugar.
So then is that a good prediction from the Heart Association or from the federal? It says 36 grams. So is that what we should strive for? Or is that kind of over because of China, you said was what, 20?
The China study actually recommends 20.
20.
I
So-
think you just keep on going lower and lower. I think.
Reduce,
Okay.
keep reducing.
Yeah.
well,
But
you do need some though.
To keep the insulin.
You need some, you want to try.
Well, that's for energy. I
You
believe.
want to
Right.
keep it to, like, what is the way to get sugar? What's the best way to get sugar?
Best way to get sugar is from like fruits and natural sugars.
And natural sugars is the best. Right, from the
So-
fruits.
But why can't I just drink a glass of grapefruit juice compared to eating grapefruit? You don't remember that one?
I do,
Okay.
but the reason you can't is because the juices, it's the fruit's concentrated, so it's like you're having like 3 apples in a little glass of apple juice. You're having it's just concentrated fruit, so it's
What's removed from it? Why is it
all
not
the
good?
fibers.
John?
Good job.
Yeah.
Brooke, do you have your question now?
Yeah. So sugar is the sugar make so when the so sugar is worse than the drug, right? It's worse for you, right?
Well, I mean, there's addicting at each other, but they're both addicting the same, but the drugs have worse effects on you. Yes.
Very good, Tyler.
Yeah, Tyler, good job.